The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of Spaced Out Radio or Spaced Out Radio Limited is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised. Are you experienced?
Stop right there!
From high atop the mountains of British Columbia to you listening around the world, this is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
They let us play with all our toys. They let us think that we're big boys. They let us make a lot of noise, but we ain't rule the world. They let us think we're Superman.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, on iTunes and TuneIn. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, or on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you. I will stop till I reach the top just to be there with you.
Dave, oh Dave, are you playing with Bigfoot and aliens again?
Dad, you gotta stop haunting the ghosts. You're scaring them.
All right, seriously, put down the pointy sticks.
Okay! Game on! Game on! Game on!
The password is...
All right.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio. Mr. Bumblefoot, Dave is ready for liftoff.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you.
Seriously, Dave? Really? Aren't you a little old for a tinfoil hat?
Hello, Toby. Bye-bye. Love you. Bye-bye.
Please take your seat about way. We're with the Edmonds. It's time to take off. Start. 2, 1. Boost ignition and lift off.
I'm such a lucky guy, 'cause after all this time, it's like the deeper I go, the deeper I fall. The deeper I go, the deeper I fall.
Good evening and welcome to Spaced Out Radio. Tonight I am your host, Dave Scott, and it's great to have you along for the ride on this Tuesday, December 12th, Wednesday, December 13th. If you're on the East Coast or across the pond, hope you had a great day and night. We are live right here in the Great White North on top of the mountains of central British Columbia as we are here for your listening needs 7 days a week. We welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of the Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network. 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. We are also live on the Fringe.fm, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Like our music, get your horns up for Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL, formerly of Guns N' Roses, currently of Art of Anarchy and Sons of Apollo. Bumblefoot is the official sound of SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you could do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, follow me at Dave Scott, SOR. Our brand new YouTube channel is youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. You can listen to us on iHeartRadio in the United States, TalkStream Live, tune us in on TuneIn, download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. Now, it should be done hopefully by tomorrow. Once again, if you go to our website, it has been down. We got majorly hacked late last week, and we are having to rebuild the entire site, so that is why it is down. Now, if you want to take part in this show, you got to do me a favor. You got to sign into one of the chat rooms. Either go on Facebook at the SOR Space Travelers group, or on Spreaker, our host broadcaster. Or if you're on Twitter, you can use the hashtag SpacedOutRadio if you want to connect live with me during the show as well. Now, normally, we have a plethora of features on our website. We are also, right now, having a GoFundMe crowdfunding. I don't even know what you call it. I don't want to say it's a contest because it's not a contest. But we're doing a little bit of crowdfunding around here right now because we want to hit the terrestrial radio markets. We need some help to improve our gear. If you go to GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night, you can help out with Spaced Out Radio as well. What would you do if you had aliens on your property, looking through your windows, following you on your land, and possibly into your house? Now, we're not talking about a one-time affair here. The constant spy versus spy game of alien greys hiding out, so much so that maybe you've even caught them on camera. Think about that. How would you react? Well, for the last 17 years on a ranch in Arizona called the Stardust Ranch, John Edmonds and his family have lived there with these special critters, or should we say pesky critters. Where do they come from? What are they there for? Who knows? But after opening up a horse farm, it's the last thing the Edmonds expected, that their ranch would be overrun with greys. But enough is enough. They're tired of it, and they now have the ranch up for sale. We're going to learn more about the Stardust Ranch tonight with our guest, owner of Stardust Ranch, John Edmonds. John, thank you so much for sharing your story tonight on Spaced Out Radio. How are you?
Hey, good evening. Thank you very much for having me back on. I'm fine. Best it can be under the circumstances. We're just trying to deal with it. And the only correction I need to make about what you said in your monologue there was it's actually 22 years from this next June 1st.
Now, I do have to ask, did you believe in aliens before you bought the ranch?
Let's put it this way. It was not something that I thought about very much. I think if somebody just walked up to me and said, man in the street, do you think aliens are possible? I would have said, yeah, probably. I mean, hard to believe that with everything that's out there in the universe that, mankind and Earth would be the only place that these creatures would exist. But, it was not something that was, a pressing issue for me.
So could you take us back to buying this farm? Why did you and your family decide to buy the 5 acres in Arizona?
Well, we had been looking around for a place that I could have horses. I had wanted to have horses ever since I was a kid growing up. on the North Shore of Chicago. And, it was just something that I started a savings account for when I was about 8 years old. And, my parents at the time encouraged me to save for the future. And I had made up my mind, even as a little kid, that I wanted to have horses, and someday I was going to move out west and have a ranch.
So here you do this fundraising thing for yourself, putting a little bit of money away since childhood, and you finally have the opportunity to buy your dream ranch. How exciting was that time for you, John, when you found the location, everything looked perfect?
Well, it was, Dave, it was a little bit weird because right before that, both my mother and my father had passed away. And so, we were kind of going through a lot of grief. And quite frankly, I just kind of wanted to take some time off and be at peace with things. And I thought buying the ranch out here, it was a nice 10-acre ranch. And I thought, hey, for the kind of money they're asking out here in the southwest of Phoenix, compared to what it costs like in Cave Creek or Scottsdale or any of the Paradise Valley areas, they want like 5 or 10 times as much money. I thought, man, I'm getting a smoking deal. The views are the same. You see the mountains. You see all the saguaro cacti. It's really very pretty. And so I thought it was a great deal. And I had no trepidation at all about purchasing it.
So when you and your family decided to purchase it, when you did your due diligence on the property, did anybody say there was anything weird with it?
No, actually, we really, it was so far out in the boonies that, at that time, there were no neighbors. There was nobody to talk to. It just seemed like sort of an outpost. And, which I thought was great. I liked the idea of having peace and quiet. And, there just was really no noise out here. I used to go out and shoot guns on the back of the property and have like a little target set up. And, it was really quiet. It was, very scenic. And I thought, man, this is great. This is exactly what I've been saving up my money for.
So for the sake of radio, could you maybe describe your property and the scenery around it so our audience could get a picture?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Our ranch sits almost dead center in an area of several 100,000 acres of wild desert. And it wasn't until the last few years that anybody started building out here. And then suddenly we started getting houses on either side of us in development. And, we might as well be living in the suburbs now. But originally it was totally empty, nothing but cacti, desert, hot, long summer days that last, from April all the way through until December. It doesn't even get to be less than 100 degrees here usually until the end of October.
So basically you had your own little piece of paradise right then and there where, you and your family decided to settle down. No neighbors around, of course, with the expansion of life. That's what happens. But it's picturesque. It's scenic. There's nothing there. So when you started all of a sudden noticing strange things happening, how quickly after you moved in there did you notice anything?
The very first day. I mean, when we went to move in, the people that had owned the ranch before us, they hadn't moved. I paid cash for the property when I bought it, and they were supposed to be out by June 1st. And we showed up at 8 o'clock in the morning on June 1st of 1996, and it was as if they had never even bothered to pack a box or anything else. And, my wife and I had the keys. We walked in. And it was just like the very first time when we went to show up to view the property. And, I looked at my wife and I said, hey, did we make a mistake here? Is this the wrong day or something? And she said, no, this is exactly the right day. They're supposed to be out. And I said, oh, my God, what are we going to do? And she said, call the realtor and see what he can do. And so we called the realtor and, explained to him what was going on. And he was shocked. And he said, okay, go out to breakfast, go out to lunch, go out and see some movies, whatever. I'll get them out of there. And he said, come back in 12 hours and, we'll see where it goes. And so we did that. We went out and we parked the rental truck and with all our stuff in it, and we got my Mustang, and off we went. And we came back 12 hours later, and we walked in, and everything was gone, and we're like, wow, this is great. Now we can move in. And I thought, you know what? We haven't looked at the pool. Let's just walk outside and see what the pool looks like. And so my wife and I walked out there. The lights were on in the pool. It was full of water. It was running. And the only thing that didn't fit with that scenario was all the stuff that had been in the house was now in the pool. And it was sticking out 3 to 4 feet above the surface of the pool.
So instead of moving their stuff out of the house, they just said to hell with it and threw it in the pool.
Well, we don't know if they did it. We don't know who did it. The realtor never, took any responsibility for it. He said he never even came to the property. He just made phone calls, and that allegedly the people had said that they were, there was some kind of mix-up and that they knew they needed to get out and they were going to do it. And so that's all he knew. And we never were able to contact the people that had lived here. We didn't have a forwarding phone number or address or anything. And so we don't know what happened.
So the strangeness starts right off the beginning, and you're trying to get comfortable into your brand new home, into your new lifestyle that you've waited forever to happen. Did you start acquiring horses and animals before you noticed anything strange happening, or did the strangeness happen as you were starting to build your hobby farm?
Well, I mean, we didn't have any animals other than a pair of Rottweilers beforehand. And, so we didn't really have a lot of animals. We didn't actually acquire horses until I started driving out in the desert. And I was finding all these domestic horses that were out in the desert. And the reason I could tell they were domestic horses was because you could drive right up to them and get out and pet them, and they were happy to see us. And, wild horses won't let you do that. They just take one look at you and snort and run the other direction. So, indeed, I knew that they were domestic horses. And, I was horrified because out in the desert, there's nothing out there except, tumbleweed and sand and, cacti. There's nothing for a domestic horse to eat. And so I realized these horses were going to starve to death. And so I started driving back into town, and I'd bring out a few bales of hay, every couple of days, and I'd feed them and try to take care of them. And gradually it got to the point when I would leave, they would follow me home. And so the next thing I knew, I had like 15 horses, and it's kind of been that way ever since. We've been anywhere from 15 all the way up to 100 when people just started dumping their horses, when we had the Great Recession here. And, people couldn't afford their horses, and they literally would take them and tie them up outside our front gates, or, just call us and say, we're desperate, can you take our horses? And so, I tried to do the very best I could, and, I would take the horses and find good homes for them.
So basically, the horses basically said, you're going to own us. That's pretty much it. And you had no choice. But in your sense, I'm assuming you're looking at your family and thinking, you know what, this is kind of cool. This is why we bought this property, was to have animals, to, establish a country-type lifestyle. So you must have been in your glory at that point.
Well, I was kind of actually, just shocked by the whole thing because, I grew up in the city. I grew up in, townhouses, apartments, things like that. I'd never owned a house before, much less a great big house with a barn and a guest house and a pool and 10 acres of land in the middle of nowhere. And so in a sense, I kind of went from being in a state of shock to a state of ultra shock where, everything new that came along just kind of was like, oh my God, now what have I got myself into? And, I just kind of rolled with it. And I said, okay, well, you asked for this. This is what you wanted. You wanted the adventure. So, deal with it, make the best of it, learn as much as you can, and just take it from there. I finally ended up realizing how much it was going to cost to maintain all the horses and everything. So I started a nonprofit charity. I went through the whole process. and filed all the paperwork, and we literally became a 501c3 charity, and we've been a charity ever since.
Shortly after you started getting everything established there, how long was it that you were on the property before you started noticing the paranormal type activity?
Excuse me. It was pretty quick. We ended up, there was a guy that was sort of an older man, looked like sort of a grizzled old vet, who apparently he was included in the property, but I didn't know that when I bought it. And he literally just showed up one day, about 3 days after we moved in, and he had a machete, and he was just walking up from the front gates before there were even front gates there. It was just a path, and walked right up on the property. I happened to be in the kitchen putting away some dishes, and I saw him out the window, and I thought, wow, I guess this guy's a neighbor or something. Well, it turned out that he thought he lived here. And so I walked out to talk to him, and I had just recently purchased a .357 Magnum, and I thought, well, this guy's armed. I probably ought to go ahead and, take this gun and take it with me. So I stuck it down the back of my pants, and I walked out there. And I asked him, what he was up to and why he was here on the property. And he greeted me, and he said, well, I live here. And I said, I just bought this property, and nobody ever told me about you. Kind of what's the deal? And he said, well, you see that building in the back? And I said, yeah, that's going to be my tack room for all my horse supplies, my saddles and blankets and, all that kind of thing. And he goes, well, that's where I live. And I said, well, what is your job here? And he goes, I'm the guy that kills the monsters. And I looked at him, and I kind of thought to myself, all right, well, you're kind of a weird-looking old dude anyway, so, maybe that doesn't surprise me that you're, saying something like that. But, I played along, and I said, what monsters? And he says, well, this place is loaded with monsters. And I said, well, I, just bought the property. I've never seen any monsters since I've been here. And he goes, oh, you will. That's my job. I keep them in check. And, I just looked at him, and I thought, well, maybe this guy's been out in the sun too long, or he drinks or, drugs or does something. And I said, well, I thank you for the offer, but I really don't need you. I'd appreciate it if you just pack up and leave. So he went back there and got his stuff, put it in like a sheet or something, and threw it over his shoulder and traipsed off. But before he left the property, he turned back and he looked at me and he goes, you're going to be really, really sorry. And I thought, wow, that's kind of like a threat. And he just shook his head. He says, you're going to be really sorry. And off he went, and I never saw him again.
What's going through your mind that sounds like it's right out of a horror movie, John. When somebody says that to you, what is going through your mind at that point when you get out of that situation and you have time to sit back and think about it?
Again, Dave, I had started seeing so many things out here already that I literally, it was kind of like I had, walked into the twilight zone. And I thought to myself, all right, what's next? And that's the one thing you never want to do is say, what's next? Because, things have a tendency to just say, oh, you want to see something else? Here we go. Here's the next chapter. And it just kept building and building and building. But, I never really had a chance to sit down and just sit there and think about it, And plus, it's not like the place came with a warranty where I could say, well, I want my money back. I want to move. I was stuck with it.
But did you contact your realtor at all to say, dude, you could have forewarned me that, there's things moving in my house or weird lights in the sky or whatever it may be?
I did. I actually called him, and I called his broker, and I said, what the hell have you got us into? And, he said, well, it's, that's how it is out there in the desert. You moved out in the middle of nowhere, and, you're going to see a lot of strange stuff. It's Arizona. What do you expect? And I thought to myself, well, that's probably a lot more true than I want to believe, but, it wasn't very helpful information.
I remember when my ex-wife and I rented a home for our family, and it was extremely haunted in our town. I remember calling up our realtor and saying, my house is haunted. And I was blown away, much like you were with the answer. My realtor says, yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I said, what do you mean? I said, what do you mean it doesn't surprise me? He goes, my friend, this is an old town. He goes, any house that's 45 years or older in this community is haunted. So get used to it, or I can find you something new. But it's amazing how realtors react when you bring it up in that situation, isn't it?
Well, there isn't anything in the SPDS which, makes people disclose anything about that. I mean, here in Arizona, you don't even have to tell anybody if you know that somebody has died on the property unless it's happened, I think, in the last year. So, it's buyer beware, and this is the first house I've ever purchased. And so I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I mean, if I had known, I would have run for the hills, I would have probably moved out of state. And we just didn't know. We thought we were getting a great deal. We thought the price was reflective of, the fact that it was in the middle of nowhere. And, we thought, hey, we're tough. We might have to put up with a few snakes. We might have to put up with some, weird creatures, but aliens, all the other weird stuff that we've run into here. Nah, never in a million years would I have ever thought that was possible.
You can never, ever predict how you're going to react when you have that. What was the first thing that happened that you recall? Was it a UFO? Was it paranormal activity in the house? Or was it weird creatures around?
There was a cluster of different things. We started seeing these orange orbs that looked like big orange balls floating in the sky south of us. And we'd always see them in threes, and we'd see like groups of these orbs in threes. And that wasn't very threatening. We thought that was kind of cool, actually. We started seeing literally other UFOs like triangles. We started seeing rods. We started seeing, just all sorts of things. And none of that stuff bothered me. I thought, well, this is kind of cool. When I have time, maybe I'll sit down and get a telescope or something, or a good camera, and try to get some pictures of it. So that part really didn't bother me at all. It was when we started seeing things on the property that really bothered me. And we started seeing animals that were being killed. We started seeing just creatures, things darting. You'd see them out of the corner of your eye. You'd see, you'd come up on places that were ice cold on a warm summer night. Things that were just out of context. And then on top of that, the people that I was meeting, I tried to get a phone put in. And I called the phone company, and I said, hey, guys, I just moved into this place, and I need a phone. I'm in the middle of nowhere. And this is really pretty much before they had cell phones. So we really needed a phone. And they said, fine. They set an appointment. Nobody showed up. And I thought, well, we're so far out here, maybe nobody knows where this is. So at first I was real understanding about it. And I called the phone company back, and I said, hey, we had an appointment today, and nobody's here. And they said, oh, you're Mr. Edmonds. And I said, yeah. And they said, nobody's going to go out there. And I said, what do you mean nobody's going to go out there? And I said, you're the phone company. I mean, if you wanted to put a phone booth on the moon, you could do it. Why can't you bring the phone out to my ranch? And they said, we can't get anybody to come. And I said, let me talk to the boss. And so I just kept climbing until I finally got to the point where I was talking to like a senior person in the company. And I said, I need a phone. I live in the middle of nowhere. I have good credit. I'm ready to pay. Why can't I have a phone? And they said, well, we'll get back to you. And so apparently I guess they got together, and whoever was the normal person that comes out to this area, or people, they drew lots, and the guy who lost had to come out here. And about a week later, he showed up, and the guy didn't want to get out of his car or out of his truck. And I said, sir, I'm here. I need my phone. Is there a problem? And this guy looked like he'd had about 100 cups of coffee. He was shaking so hard, and he was so afraid. And I looked at him, and I said, hey, I'm a nice guy. Why are you afraid? He goes, I'm not afraid of you. And I said, well, what are you afraid of? And he goes, do you know the place that you purchased? Do you know what kind of place this is? And I said, yeah, it's a ranch in the middle of nowhere. And he says, it's a lot more than that. And I said, okay, can you tell me about it? And he goes, I'm just here to put the phone in, but I'll talk to you a little bit as we go. And so he went ahead, and it was the fastest phone installation you've ever seen. I mean, it took him like 20 minutes, and I was like, wow, that was quick. Along the way, he told me about the history of this place and all the people that apparently lived here and all the problems they had here and the fact that one person had committed suicide in the living room. And, the stories went on and on and on, and I was just blown away. And I called the realtor back afterwards, and I said, listen, we got a thing here. And he goes, what do you mean, a thing? And I said, well, I just had a phone put in here, and apparently the local that handles putting in phones has told me the history of this property. I said, did you have any history of this before? Did you know anything about it? And he goes, no, nobody ever disclosed anything to me. So once again, here I am. I'm finding out the hard way. And it was crazy. I mean, the original owners apparently built the property. The man who built it as a surprise for his wife. When it was all finished, he had her come out and look at the property. She took one look at it, and she said, absolutely, there is no way I'm moving into that place. And apparently what she told him was that she had really, really bad feelings about it, really like a premonition that there was some kind of darkness or something out here. And she said that she would